I'm broadcasting this in 1280 by 800 resolution. If you're running in a lesser resolution that you might not be able to see all the slide on one screen, you may have to scroll down. But if you're running in 1280 or higher, you should be able to see the full screen if you go to full screen mode, which you can do by click. There's a full activate full screen mode button in the lower right of the screen. All right, so again, thanks for joining us. Let's do a quick overview of what we're going to talk about today. Just a couple of minutes on orientation, just a little bit about us, the analytics team here at SoftMart, what we do, and then just a few words on the larger context of what's driving changes to licensing that we're seeing, like what we see with Office 365. And then we're going to go into Office 365 in particular. We're going to start with, there's lots of decks out there that talk about all the different plans and what's in them, and we are going to be doing some of that. But our real goal here is to really kind of orient you on Office 365 and how you approach Office 365. It's a very different licensing exercise than anything that's ever existed before. It's brand new to all of us, so in many ways we're all kind of making these rules up as we go along, looking for best practices. And so we're going to share with you today, having done this multiple times with many customers of different shapes and sizes, kind of what we think the best practices are for how you would approach the question of, is Office 365 right for me? And if so, what does that landscape look like? So we're going to try to go through from that perspective. We'll start with kind of a general overview of the licensing behind Office 365 and get into some of the sort of the general guiding principles. We'll talk about some specific steps to take in beginning your approach to the question of Office 365. Then we're going to walk through each of the major components of Office 365 and how we wrap that all together into a licensing strategy, and ultimately come down to both a technology and a financial strategy around Office 365 and, determining whether it's right for your organization. Following that, Casey Lindsay is going to take over, and he's going to talk about the Microsoft SAM program, with licensing becoming as complex as it has been in recent months and years. The Microsoft SAM program offers a pretty good opportunity to leverage that program to get a handle on licensing, and Casey's going to tell you about what that is, what it entails, what the parameters are, so you can make a determination if that's something that's right for your organization. All right, so just a little bit of orientation. Our piece of the licensing world is Microsoft licensing. That's what the analytics team at SoftMart was formed to do, and our mission is really divided into four parts. First and foremost, we conduct our own independent research on all things Microsoft. So we talk to Gartner, we talk to Forrester, we talk to Directions on Microsoft, we patrol the blogs, et cetera, and really try to stay on top of all the myriad licensing changes that are going on within the Microsoft stack. We also, probably the biggest part of our job is the applied science, though. The research is the theory, the applied science is translating that into actionable licensing strategies. And so we spend a great deal of our time working directly with customers, helping them translate, what those changes are into action. And analytics is the system that we use, the system that we've developed over the years to help customers through that. And the fourth part of our role, and what we're here for today is as we, for those of you that attended the last webinar we did, is the demystification function, which is really taking specific topics in Microsoft licensing that are challenging all of us and really trying to find a way to break down the complexity and break it into meaningful parts, repeatable processes, things that we can do to really go from, here's a basket of knowledge into here's actionable intelligence that we can actually make decisions on. And that's what we're going to do today with Office 365 and the Microsoft SAM program. So as we said in the last webinar, there's been heavy changes to both the computing environment and the licensing environment over the last few years, driven really by three things. The biggest change drivers, application and desktop virtualization, server virtualization, and cloud computing. Last time we went through a great deal on the application, desktop virtualization, and server virtualization, and today we're going to talk about cloud computing. The biggest problem that we face is that licensing doesn't always keep up with the pace of technology change. Licensing is not something that likes change. Licensing is the revenue side of the house for the software publishers, and as such, it operates best in a steady state environment. And unfortunately, over the last couple of years, the pace of change has far outpaced the ability for the publishers to keep up with those changes in their licensing. So we get to a point where there's a lot of complex be made in order to right-size the software investment. And so in that matrix of change, we've kind of come up with what we think are a few guiding principles for how to think about software licensing and software acquisition and technology strategy in that matrix. First and foremost is to plan your licensing strategy in tandem with your technology strategy to eliminate painful gotchas. Can't stress this enough. And, it's no longer, it's better now for all stakeholders in that decision to work together from the beginning. So it's not, procurement working with IT, working with contracts, working with finance, all of them working together in tandem to make sure you're covering this from every angle, because it has gotten so much more complicated. So we always encourage our customers to plan that licensing along with the technology strategy. Don't do one or the other first and then kind of back to the other end. Do them both together. Second is don't assume anything. There are no stupid questions in software licensing, but there are plenty of stupid answers. So you want to make sure that if something doesn't sound right, smell right, taste right, feel right, that you keep asking those questions until you get answers that you're satisfied with. Very important. And then lastly, watch for licensing dependencies. Now more than ever, the technology stack is highly integrated. So, SharePoint is related to SQL, is related to Windows, is related to Exchange, is related to Office, is related to Project. All of these things kind of are woven together into a single kind of stack fabric. And so you can't really plan for one without adequately planning for all the things upon which that is dependent. So that's been, a major development in software licensing is you kind of have to address the whole picture. You can't really focus exclusively on just one part and solve one problem, because if you pull a lever over here, it might activate another lever over there, etc. So those are kind of our three guiding principles for thinking about software licensing and acquisition in a heavy change environment. All right, so that being aside, let's go on to Office 365. I want to start just in general, what is Office 365? There's been a lot of buzz, but at its core, Office 365 is transforming that traditional core desktop software of the Microsoft stack, which is Office, SharePoint, Exchange, and Link, all those communication collaboration tools, transforming them from a locally run resource, that's a software resource, into an actual service, or almost like a presentation layer, right? It's the point where the eyeball of the user meets the data that's coming from the data center, rather than going and being brokered by heavy local resources. So Office 365 is Microsoft's attempt to transform what has for them been the core of their company into from a piece of software into a service. And again, it primarily involves the Office suite, so the traditional Office that we've all known and loved and used for the last gazillion years. SharePoint, which is their communication collaboration, or their collaboration team platform, and now BI platform. Exchange for email, and Link for communication. So I want to highlight some of the differences now, since this is a licensing conversation. I want to highlight some of the key differences between the traditional licensing that we've all grown up with to the Office 365 service. And we're going to get real specific on each of these areas, but I want to start at a high level and work our way into this. So first and foremost, traditional licensing is what I call on-premise or private cloud rights. So that's where, you're buying software, you're installing it on local machines. Of late, a lot of times you're installing it on a server, in your infrastructure if you're serving up like a virtual desktop. But either way, you're paying for resources that you're installing on your machines, your hardware infrastructure, and serving up to your users. In the Office 365 world, the use rights come with online, private cloud, and on-premise rights. So now bundled into the Office 365 usage rights are the ability to deploy that software locally like you're used to deploy that in a private cloud environment, or deploy that now in the Microsoft public cloud. All right. In traditional licensing, you have what I call self-supported infrastructure and disaster recovery, right? Those functions are things that you're providing to your own user base, whereas in the Office 365 service, one of the major sort of cost-offsetting components of running a service like this in the cloud is that information lives on distributed data centers that you don't own and you don't have to maintain, and you don't have to pay for disaster recovery. So that's a key difference. The infrastructure and disaster recovery requirements are very different between traditional licensing and a traditional deployment in Office 365. This next one could be good or bad depending on, on your infrastructure, but traditional licensing, drives a very customizable solution. So, in your infrastructure, you can customize Exchange, you can customize these products, you can customize SharePoint, you can customize as much as you can tolerate. Whereas under Office 365, you're consuming Microsoft service, and so it's not customizable in the same way. You can't manipulate the software to do everything you want it to do. You're sort of bound. I mean, it's highly configurable, but it does not have that same level of customization. Now, we've all learned our lesson in the past with customization and how when you customize to the nth degree, you kind of sort of get trapped in old versions. There's some traps there. So, like I said, that could be perceived as a good or a bad thing, but it's important to realize that you're not going to have the same level of flexibility and customization as in the Office 365 world as you would under a traditional deployment. Big difference between traditional licensing and Office 365. Most of Microsoft's licensing customers in the traditional space are running perpetual licensing, meaning you're buying and you're owning an asset, a software asset. They do have a subscription model, but it's not very highly used. But it's important to note that in the Office 365 world, everything is subscription only, right? There are no perpetual use rights that come with the Office 365 suite. And as such, the Office component of Office in a traditional deployment is a device-based license, right? It's actually a per accessing device-based license, meaning every device, in most cases, that's accessing Office, whether it's installed locally or whether it's being housed, and delivered via terminal services, or it's being delivered via VMview or Citrix Zen Desktop or Hyper-V. Every device that's accessing Office needs a license. Under the Office 365 model, it is user-based. So this is the first time in Microsoft history that Office has ever become a user-based application where instead of counting devices and counting accessing devices, you're counting up users. So again, that can be a double-edged sword depending on your device-to-user ratios, but under Office 365, you are restricted to a user-based EULA. Under traditional licensing, you upgrade when you want to, right? Whether Microsoft has always embedded downgrade rights in their software. So if you buy an Office 2010 license, you can install Office 2003, you can install Office 95 if you want to. So you have those rights to downgrade, and you can upgrade at your pace. Under the Office 365 model, you are always going to be consuming the most current version of these products. There are no downgrade rights, even if you're exercising your corresponding on-premise rights. So if you buy Link Online, that gives you the right to run Link in the Microsoft Cloud. It gives you the right to run Link in your own environment. However, it's always going to, under the Office 365 model, you will not be able to say, adopt Link Online and then install OCS 2007. The downgrade rights do not exist in the Office 365 sphere. So that's something to be very cognizant of, that you're always going to be on the most current version. When Microsoft upgrades, you're going to upgrade. So that's the way the Office 365 licensing works. And again, that's because it's a service, right? And then lastly, traditional licensing is, what I call self-supported, and by that I mean you're paying for your support outside of the licensing investment. You may be consuming Microsoft Premier support, but you're still paying extra. It's a separate contract, etc. Office 365 does include 24/7 support as part of the licensing fee that you're paying. It's not unrestricted support, meaning if you have 5,000 users, all 5,000 can call Microsoft every day. It is restricted to certain named users within the organization, but it does provide support built into the subscription licensing cost. Well, we have a question. Okay, go ahead.
Could you speak a little bit about the security of the data stored in the data center?
So the security of the data stored in the data center, what you're going to want to do is check out Microsoft's security policy, because all the data stored in that data center is going to live under the law of Microsoft's security policies. Now, Microsoft will tell you that those policies are in many cases even more stringent than those of a given customer, and in some cases they may be right, in some cases they may be wrong. But from what we've been told, the security is it operates under the Microsoft general security policy. But that is definitely one of the primary concerns about deploying Office 365 is the data secure. I will say that the jury is still out on that question. You can see a lot of people that say yes, it absolutely is, to no, it's not, to everything in between. So I would say that's, if that's a concern, that's really something that you'd want to look deep into and look very detailed, comparing Microsoft security policy to your own, to make sure that there's alignment there before you think about Office 365.
Just to further the question,
yep.
Are the data centers SAS 70 certified?
find out and publish the answer to that. I'm not sure off the top of my head, but we will get a square answer on that and send that out to you. All right, so let's talk about, from a general perspective, guiding principles. And like I said, this is brand new for all of us, so there are no best practices. There are no well-established best practices. So because we've done this several times, we've modeled this for several customers. We're going to share with you what we think our guiding principles are. I'm not saying that this is the gospel or anything, but this is how we do it. And so I wanted to share that with you. First and foremost, you have to recognize that Office 365 is a service. It's a sea change for Microsoft, right? We're moving from traditional licensing to a service-based model, and that requires a different way of thinking. First and foremost, it requires an interdisciplinary approach. As you're going to see in the sort of mini case study that we go through as we walk through these various components and what they do, there are going to be questions and things that arise that a procurement function could not answer without help from an IT function, and vice versa, or couldn't answer without help from a finance function. So if you're going to even ask the question about Office 365, we recommend you get a committee together that has all the stakeholders involved from day one. So you've got somebody from finance, you've got somebody from IT, somebody from procurement, however many constituencies you have that would be impacted by this, get everybody together to start with. That's the best way to approach this. Second of all, when you're thinking about finance, under the traditional licensing model, there's generally a software license asset that you acquire that you can depreciate, and then you go into paying maintenance, a lower rate of maintenance over time if you're doing maintenance. Under Office 365, it's all OpEx. You are paying for a service, so there really isn't anything to capitalize. Now, as if you're setting things up or you're doing infrastructure maintenance, or there are some things you can capitalize, but the software itself, the pieces that you're consuming, are going to be all OpEx, and so you need to think about how that's going to impact you from a financial perspective. And then lastly, licensing in 3 dimensions. So like I said before, this opens up, there probably isn't going to be a large organization out there that's 100% public cloud. It's mostly going to be, you're going to see elements of that organization in a private cloud, some in a public cloud, some on-premise. Maybe things are going to shift around back and forth, but it's really, as we're seeing things unfold, it's looking like everybody, there's going to be a heterogeneous environment. It's probably going to be the predominant mode for, the computing environment of the future. And as such, now you need to think about licensing for on-premise, licensing in the cloud, public cloud, licensing in a private cloud. So licensing in 3 dimensions, again, you've got to start thinking in 3 dimensions when you're thinking about these questions. Dana, you're looking at me like we have a question.
Okay. We do. So in Office 365, how do you keep the on-premise installs updated?
That is a good question. It's going to vary by product set, so why don't we, as we're answering the question on SAT 70, we'll put together a little bullet that says, here's how it works in Link, SharePoint, Office, and Exchange. So we'll get that answer published as well. All right, Office 365 offers more options and flexibility to tailor the licensing to your specific computing environment. Again, very important. You've got a lot more options in in Office 365. In an EA, traditional enterprise agreement, you don't have a lot of. There's some choices, but not a ton. Office 365 is really designed to be more catered and tailored to your specific computing environment, which on the one hand is awesome because more choices equals more awesome, but on the other hand, that also means more complexity, as we're going to see as we start going through these examples. So again, you've got to be prepared to do things a little bit differently when you approach Office 365. And finally, and most important, TCO is the battlefield with Office 365. We've seen a lot of customers get into this thinking that the underlying licensing price of Office 365 is going to be cheaper than what they're paying today. And in some rare cases that is true, but in most cases, especially if you're an existing enterprise agreement customer and you've paid your licenses long ago and you're just maintaining software assurance, you're going to see an increase in price for Office 365, and in some cases it may be shockingly so. So, the concept that this is going to be, that the cost savings of Office 365 is in the licensing just does not materialize. So 2 things rise from that. Number one, I would caution you against asking anyone for just, pricing on Office 365, because without understanding that, and going through the process we're going to articulate in just a minute, I think you're going to be disappointed with the result. This is something that requires a lot of forethought to even know what to quote and how to quote it. So I would not, you can't take the same approach that you do where, you sort of get a general idea of what the cost will be and then work from there. You want to work from the ground up on Office 365. You're also going to want to be prepared to have a TCO conversation. And again, that plays back to the idea of having all your stakeholders together, because where this is really going to, the final cost as to whether this is from a financial perspective and a technology perspective a better platform than what you're doing today, is going to rest on how does it impact other areas. You know, what kind of infrastructure savings are you realizing? What kind of cost reduction around infrastructure and disaster recovery are you realizing? What solutions are you displacing, and how much is that saving or costing you, et cetera? This will go down to TCO. So you know, from a pure licensing perspective, you're probably not going to find what you're looking for. You're going to have to be prepared to widen the scope of your search to include just about everything. So those are the guiding principles. Now let's talk about how we get started on actually addressing this question. First and foremost, you're going to want to classify your users, right? You're going to want to look at your user community and say, okay, how is my computing environment, you know, shaping up? For, you know, most customers don't have a homogeneous computing environment where everybody has one smartphone, one laptop of this shape, of this variety. Most customers out there, you know, you've got constituencies that have 4 devices. You've got constituencies that have 1 device and it's a laptop. And you've got constituencies that have maybe a desktop and a slate and a smartphone. So you need to, Office 365 is built to match workload with user class, and so the first place to start is classifying your users. Any schema is going to work, right? Some people go with the user type, you know, information worker versus task worker versus executive versus this versus that. But a device profile might work. If you've got a certain subset of users that have sort of this device profile, you know, like a desktop and a smartphone, and then you've got this other, you know, constituency that has desktop, smartphone, slate, et cetera, you know, that kind of breakdown might work as well. But you really need to familiarize yourself with how many different user classes you have within your organization. That's the starting place for addressing the Office 365 question. Once you do that, you need to then determine the consumption needs of each class for all the Office 365 components. So your decision on, think of your decision on Office 365 as a matrix, right? There's 4 little decisions that need to be made around what kind of Office do I need, what kind of Exchange do I need, what kind of link do I need, what kind of SharePoint do I need, and all of those are then going to roll up to what Office 365 plan configuration is right for me. So once you have your users classified, you don't want to go to the Office 365 plans yet. You want to go through each of those components and determine your consumption requirements for those classes, and we're going to show you how that looks in just a minute. But that's the second step. So first classify your users, then you're going to determine the consumption needs for each class of user, and then the third step is sort of a 2-part step. One, you're going to now that you know all this, you're going to map those consumption requirements to Office 365 service plans, right? Now you're ready to start asking the licensing question. But at the same time, you're going to dive deep into the technical parameters to ensure a smooth transition. Office 365 is different than the traditional products, right? The link you get in Office 365 is somewhat different and functions differently than the link of when you buy perpetual licensing. And so as you're exploring the licensing question, you also want to make sure that you're vetting the technology and making sure that it's going to work for you. Those 2 steps can be done in tandem, but they're both vital because you might come up with a perfect licensing solution for you, but if that doesn't work from a technical architecture perspective, it's dead in the water, and vice versa. So what your last step is going to be not just looking at what the financial consideration is, but looking at the technical implementation of that as well. Do we have?
We do. If licensing is user-based, why consider the device profile?
Well, just because that's kind of a gateway question, right? You're going to get into, if you're looking at, let's say you have a user that has a device that certain questions can come into, really that's relevant from a virtualization, if you're heavily into virtualization on the desktop side, because that's where you start getting into questions of who owns the device is going to determine how that licensing is dealt. In some cases, as we'll see, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but the Office of Office 365 doesn't allow for VDI deployments or RDS, remote desktop access. So there are some configurations where that just makes sense for the user to think about from an Office and a total licensing perspective. It's really more a matter of convenience.
Okay, we have 2 more.
Yes.
What is the bandwidth requirement per organization to leverage Office 365 successfully? What needs to be considered?
Okay, that one we'll add to our list to put some research behind because there's lots of different answers to that question. Again, that's something that I don't think there's a consensus on. So we'll put together a couple of links to some of the studies. You know, what Microsoft says, what other people that aren't Microsoft have said. Okay, second question. That was it. Okay, we're good. All right. So let's start going through the. So we're going to kind of do this case file style, right? So we're going to use a fairly simple case file. Let's pretend we're a hospital, large hospital system. We've got about 3,000 seats. Let's just, for the sake of argument, say that our volume licensing is really old as the hills. We're still running Office 95 and Windows ME, you know, because we were the only ones that actually deployed Windows ME. And, you know, we got to upgrade both our licensing and our technology. So we're not going to get entangled into transitioning from one agreement state to another. We'll address that, but for this case study, I want to keep it simple. So, you know, right now we've got to decide Office 365 or on-premise. We have approximately the same number of users and devices, and that's actually happening in healthcare as, you know, clinical workers and task workers start to have smartphones in place themselves. So we have been running into a lot of hospitals that, you know, kind of have the same user device count, so that way it makes it easier on us. And we have two main user classes. We have an information worker that has everything in multiple devices, and we have clinical workers that don't use Office, and they have multiple devices. So we're going to kind of walk through each of these components and look at it from the perspective of this case file as we go. All right, so now we need to determine our consumption requirements for each of these four components. All right, let's start with Exchange. So Exchange itself has three different plans that are available in the Microsoft Office 365 world. The first is, you know, we have Exchange Plan 1, we have Exchange Plan 2, and then we have what they call a kiosk plan. All right, here's the main differences between them. All right, the mailbox size in Exchange Plan 1, everybody gets a 25 gig mailbox, okay? And that can be partitioned up into active and archive, however you want. Exchange Plan 2, however, it's often billed as having unlimited email. It technically does because you have unlimited archiving, but you're still restricted to a 25 gigabyte mailbox. But you do have unlimited archiving. So, you know, going with Exchange Plan 2 is going to give you that unlimited archive. And the Exchange Kiosk is really, think of the kiosk as really designed for people that use their PCs less than 10% of their workday. Okay, so kiosk isn't really going to be that relevant in the enterprise space, but it's out there. It's going to give you a 500 megabyte mailbox, and that's it. But there's a lot of similarities between the plans. Everybody's going to get Outlook Web App, right? So everybody gets to run OWA if they want. You'll have Exchange Active Sync in both Exchange Plan 1 and 2. You will not have it in the kiosk plan. You'll still be able to set inbox rules like you're used to in both Exchange Plan 1 and 2. You'll both have interoperability with Link Instant Messaging if you're running Link in both Exchange Plan 1 and 2. You can set custom retention policies on all three plans, so you know you can determine and enforce your retention policies within your organization. You'll be able to run create personal archives for Exchange Plan 1 and 2. And the forefront security for Exchange comes with all three plans. So there's a lot of similarities. You can see, you know, primarily the difference between Plan 1 and Plan 2 is the size of the mailbox. There are a couple of other key differences. Exchange Plan 2 gives you legal hold, or this is sometimes called litigation hold. This is the ability for you to go in and override a retention policy for a given user. So, you know, like let's say you're in a situation where you're trying to, you know, to protect discoverable emails. You know, the user of that mailbox could go and delete everything and delete their archives or whatever. But with the legal hold in place, none of that will be permanently deleted. Those records will be maintained. The ability to enforce litigation holds only comes in Exchange Plan 2, as well as the ability to use the Microsoft Unified Voicemail, where you're getting your voicemail through your Exchange mailbox. That only comes in Exchange Plan 2. So again, very similar between the plans with a couple of major exceptions, one being the unlimited archiving that comes with Exchange Plan 2. The other important one is the ability to execute litigation holds in Exchange Plan 2, and then if you're doing the unified voicemail, that only comes in Exchange Plan 2. Questions?
Some folks said they couldn't hear me.
Okay.
Moving a little closer. Okay, so we have a question here. It says unlimited archive, 25 gigabytes, or is it higher? Does it support TLS email encryption for HIPAA high-tech requirements?
I don't think. You know what? I'll find out for sure on the HIPAA. I don't think so. It's not listed in the features matrix, but I'll find out for sure on that. And the stipulation on the mailbox size is the mailbox size can be up to 25 gigs, and you have unlimited archiving. So your archives, whatever you archive off can be archived as big as you want.
For IM, Interop, and OWA, does that mean that if you're using Outlook on your desktop, it doesn't work with Link?
I want to say yes, we'll confirm, but I think that's why it's only in Outlook Web Access. I think that's one of the limitations.
Is IM interoperability, does that work with an on-premise MS CRM system?
With on-premise MS CRM with Dynamics, I don't think so. I think that's I don't think so. But they have made some updates lately, so we'll find out if that was addressed. But I want to say on the surface, no, it does not. All right, so going to our case file, we're going to say for our case file that we absolutely want Exchange Plan 2 for our information workers, and that litigation hold thing is pretty important to us. So we're not really sure if we need Exchange Plan. Ideally we'd like Exchange Plan 1 for our clinical workers because that's really all we need. However, there is that question about we kind of want legal hold, so we may need Exchange Plan 2 for our clinical workers. Okay, so that's Exchange. So we know for Exchange we want Plan 2 for our information workers, and we're not sure on our clinical workers yet. SharePoint Online. All right, so let's look at the differences in the SharePoint plans. There's not a whole lot of differences between the SharePoint plans. When you sign up for SharePoint Online, whether it's Plan 1 or Plan 2 or Kiosk, well, you can't sign up for the Kiosk by itself. So it's additional to Plan 1 or Plan 2. But you're going to start with a 10 gigabyte base, and you're going to get an additional 500 megabytes of storage per user added, whether you're on SharePoint Plan 1 or Plan 2. The difference really comes down to those enterprise features. So, and when by enterprise features, I mean like Excel services, Visio services, Access services, plugging these things into your SharePoint. On SharePoint Plan 1, you've got view rights to content created using those services. In SharePoint Plan 2, you're going to get, and in the Kiosk, or SharePoint Plan 2, you're going to get view and, the ability to create, edit, and view. So it very much aligns like the difference between the SharePoint Standard Cal and the SharePoint Standard Plus Enterprise Cal. The ability to serve up and do integration with Visio, Excel, Access, etc., is the purview of the Plan 2. You get My Site pages in Plan 1 and Plan 2. Office Web Apps, if you're using Office Web Apps, depending on what overall plan you get, you'll have either view or view and edit rights in SharePoint Plan 1, and you definitely get view and edit rights in SharePoint Plan 2, meaning you can both create content and consume content through Office Web Apps. Document collaboration, you're going to get that in all the plans, and by that I mean the ability to check in and check out, version control, etc. That's going to be available in all. And then for workflows, you'll have the ability to fill in forms. So if somebody publishes an info path form or something, if you're in Plan 1, you can still fill it out and save it. You just can't create forms. So if you want to be able to actually create content, you're going to need SharePoint Plan 2. I wanted to highlight a few of the things that are not in SharePoint Online. Okay, and this is not an exhaustive list, but these are the big ones. All right, so the BI functionality that comes with Performance Point is currently not in SharePoint Online. The ability to hook your search into outside data sources is not going to exist in SharePoint Online, and the business connectivity services, so plugging your SharePoint into external applications or line of business applications, that kind of thing, that is currently not present in SharePoint Online. So there are some pretty major limitations to SharePoint Online. Those may mean nothing, or they may be very important depending on the size and scope of your own SharePoint deployment, but they're important to note. Dana,
can you use SharePoint plans for external-facing websites?
Yes, there's a SharePoint. Oh, you mean for are you talking about for customer-facing?
I would think so. For an external-facing, so I would think it would be a customer-facing website.
Yes, but I'll get you some details on that, some specific details on that. I want to research that a little bit to qualify that answer. All right, so in our case, let's say that for our information workers, we are creating info path forms and doing those kind of things. So we definitely need SharePoint Plan 2, and for our clinical workers, they don't need the ability to publish anything. They just need to consume and fill in forms. So we're going to go with SharePoint Plan 1. All right, so Link Online is pretty simple because the difference between Plan 1 and Plan 2 is really down to web conferencing. So you're, under link plan 1, it's strictly, the IM and presence, one-to-one, point-to-point communication, some federation rights, exchange active sync. If you want the web conferencing functionality, the ability to you can still attend web conferences with link plan 1, but the ability to schedule meetings and conduct online web conferencing is the purview of link plan 2. There are a few things, again, just like with SharePoint, that you're not going to get in the link online version of this. Central traffic logging and routing is not part of the link online suite at this time. Malware and content scans, so the ability to scan those IMs for inappropriate content or malware, does not exist in the link online platform at this time. And smartphone integration, although that is probably coming in Q1 of 2012 on most smartphones. Right now, the ability to do link IM on your smartphone is not present in the link online platform right now. Question?
Yes, for SharePoint storage, is it encrypted? This person is asking to see if it will support high-tech HIPAA rules.
I want to say in the public cloud version, I don't think so, but again, we're compiling a list of all these kind of research questions that we'll publish answers to at the conclusion of the call. We'll go and do the due diligence and provide you with answers and publish that to the entire group. Okay, so this one's pretty simple. My hospital, we're using web conferencing. Everybody needs to be able to create and host web conferences, so everybody needs Link Online Plan 2. All right, so we need to talk a little bit about Office, because there is some confusion about what kind of Office you get with Office 365. There is something called Office Web Apps, and let me be clear on what those are. That is a functional version of the core Office products of Word, PowerPoint, Excel, and OneNote. Okay, it's not one-to-one what you're used to. It's a functional version of those, so it's limited in its scope, but it still looks and feels like Office. So, I'm a Google Apps user as well as an Office user, and it's a better experience than Google Apps in my personal opinion, but it is definitely limited in functionality. The most important thing to note is it's not like a website you go to consume this. It's delivered via SharePoint Online and consumed via a web browser. So in order to stand up Office Web Apps for users, you have to have SharePoint Online up and running, or your own version of SharePoint. It's hosted through SharePoint, basically. You can do it through Windows Live, but you wouldn't want to. So, you're doing it through SharePoint. So that's the most important thing. It's not like just a pure web version of these Office applications. It's that, but delivered through SharePoint and served up through SharePoint. All right. So the Office in Office 365, the Office Pro that you get in the Plan E3 or Plan E4 is the same Office Pro software that you're used to using today, run on your local machines, as Office is in most cases today. It's not a different version from a software standpoint, but it is a different version from a licensing standpoint. So here's the differences. Number one, it's a user-based subscription for Office that will allow you to run Office Professional on up to 5 devices. So it's not unlimited use per user. You can run Office on up to 5 devices per user account of Office 365. Okay, so 5 devices per user. It is always current. There are no downgrade rights. So when Office 2013 comes out, all those installations of Office will have to be upgraded to Office 2013, et cetera. So that it's not like before where you could sit on an older version until you're ready to upgrade. Those are the rights you have for the Office license you get with Office 365. They don't have downgrade rights. There's a different install procedure. So you're not installing off your traditional volume licensing media like you've done for years. There is a separate image to download and install from that includes an extra activation layer. The one exception to this rule is if you've already deployed Office 2010 throughout your entire organization, they will not make you go back and reinstall Office 2010. You'll basically start installing the new version of Office when the next version after 2010 comes out. But if you're running anything other than 2007, you're going to have to download and install from the Office 365 website and that image versus taking it off of your volume licensing media like you've been used to. And the reason for that is because there's an extra activation layer within Office 365's version of Office that will require you to input the Office 365 users account code or whatever that code that they get once every 30 days. So there's an extra activation procedure, extra validation that comes with that. And because of that extra activation layer, RDS, VDI, and App V deployments are not supported, and nor is remote access. So you basically can't run this version of Office virtually. It's going to be installed locally on machines and resources, and that's pretty much it. So there are some pretty significant differences of Office that you get with Office 365 that you need to be aware of, and that's what these are. Any questions? Okay. Good. All right, so let's go back to our case file and kind of lay out where we're at. So we've got our information workers who are going to need Exchange Plan 2, SharePoint Plan 2, Link Plan 2, and Office Pro. We've got our clinical workers who we're not sure what Exchange Plan they should go with yet. They don't need SharePoint Plan 2. They only need SharePoint Plan 1. They do need Link Plan 2, and let's say that, that they could use Office Web Apps if that's available. So now we're going to start looking at, from the licensing, what plans am I going to choose for our hospital. So there are 4 basic plans. There's really 6 plans, 6 basic plans for Office 365, and I've got them on the screen here. Plan E1 is going to give you Exchange Plan 1, SharePoint 1, and Link 1. And the price I've got here is, just the published list price. Volume discount licensing prices will be discounted somewhat, not as much as you think, but they will be discounted somewhat depending on what level, and if you're in an EA, what level of EA you're at. But these are good, these are good estimates. So the Plan E1 is going to run you about $10 a month. Plan E2, it bumps the Link up to Link Plan 2, so you're still getting Exchange 1, SharePoint 1. You're getting Link 2 now, so you're getting the added ability to host web conferencing, and you're getting the Office Web Apps, the ability to deploy Office Web Apps through SharePoint, and that's going to run you about $16 a month per user. Plan E3 now bumps your Exchange and your SharePoint up to Plan 2 and adds the Office Professional Plus license, bearing in mind those differences between the Office Professional Plus you have today versus what this is. And then Plan E4 is exactly the same as Plan E3, but it adds the Link Plus functionality, or the PBX replacement functionality, and that's going to run you about $27 a month. And then I've also given you the 2 flavors of the Exchange of the kiosk plan for those kiosk workers, the ones that use their PCs less than 10% of their workday. You get Exchange and SharePoint in the K1 plan, and then you also get Office Web Apps in K2. So those are the current plan choices under Office 365. And so what we have to do now is determine where we fall with our case file. So looking at where we're at, it's pretty clear that our information workers fall under the Exchange plan, the Office 365 Plan E3, right? That gives me my Exchange 2, SharePoint 2, Link 2, and my Office Professional Plus. So I'm good there. But here's where we see my dilemma around my clinical workers. Okay, so if I really need that litigation hold feature that's only present in Exchange Plan 2, notice that I'm going to have to license them for Office 365 Plan E3. What I really want is Office 365 Plan E2 because that's cheaper, and those are not Office users, those clinical workers. But as you can see, the Exchange Plan 2 doesn't start until I get into Office 365 Plan E3. So I've got a tough choice to make. So let's look at my options. All right. So option 1 is I put my information workers under the E3 plan, and I put my clinical workers under the E2 plan. All right, so let's look at the pros and cons. On the pro side, that pretty much aligns with my on-premise computing environment today, right? I have my information workers who are consuming Office and everything else and creating content. They're my content creators, and I have my clinical workers that are my content consumers and don't use Office, right? So, but by going with Plan E2, I'm going to get the enhanced functionality of getting Office Web Apps for those clinical workers. So that way, if they want to use limited Word, Excel, PowerPoint, OneNote, etc., they'll be able to. So it expands my technology footprint a bit. Problem is, I won't be able to get the legal hold or unified voicemail for those clinical workers. So using that raw pricing, I look here at my annual cost is going to come down to about $672,000 a year for that solution, right? Using the math of 1,000 information workers and 2,000 clinical workers. You can see the numbers there. All right, so let's look at what would happen if I decided to go to the Plan E3 for everybody, right? So this is to get the litigation hold on my clinical workers. I'm going to need to go to Exchange Plan 2, so that means I'm going to need to buy Exchange Plan 3 or Office 365 Plan E3 for everyone. The pros here is I'm now able to provide the legal hold and unified voicemail to the clinical workers. And it's going to give me on-premise access rights to the SharePoint Exchange Enterprise CALs across the board, which we didn't have before. So again, I get to expand my technology footprint. But since I don't currently necessarily license any of my clinical workers for Office, I'm basically going to now start paying for Office for everybody. So in this plan, I'm going to be stuck paying for Office for people who aren't using Office. And as you can see from a cost perspective, it's a lot more expensive than $762,000 a year. So this is the kind of choice that I'm going to have to make. So what do I do now? Do I not use legal hold for my clinical workers, but what if I really need it? You know, is it worth paying the extra money just to have the legal hold? You know, what do I do? Those are the types of push and pull arguments that you get when you start looking at Office 365, and it's not a question that necessarily IT or finance or legal or anybody can answer in isolation. It's something that you're really going to have to work through and decide what solution works best for you. To spend more money to have the capability, or to spend less money but have less capabilities. So that's kind of those are sort of the types of discussions that you get into when you really start trying to map your computing environment into an Office 365 environment. It's not an easy exercise, but it is one worth doing if you think that going to the cloud is going to be a benefit to the organization. So the pricing that we looked at, again, that's pure list pricing, and that's assuming that, again, I don't have any existing software licensing agreements. If I already had an enterprise agreement, the pricing would be very different. For one, when you have an enterprise agreement, you can transition it to Office 365 and even transition it back at your own pace. And I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty details of this other than to say that if you have an enterprise agreement, you can gradually work your way into Office 365 rather than having to make a wholesale conversion all at once. And as such, you'll be able to then basically pay for what that estate looks like at any given year. So let's say you say, I'm going to migrate 500 users to the cloud this year, and you do so, you'll start paying for those 500 users at your next agreement anniversary. And then let's say you migrate another 100 the following year, then you'll start paying for those extra 100 at your next agreement anniversary, and so on. So you have a lot more flexibility. When you just consume Office 365 from Microsoft's website, you start paying from day one for whatever you consume. When you're migrating away from an enterprise agreement, you can transition that at your own pace, and you can even transition back if you wanted. So if you put those 500 users in the cloud and hated it, the next year you could go back to being your standard old enterprise agreement that you've always had. So they've given you a lot more flexibility if you're already in an enterprise agreement to be able to transition. And you can continue to, if you have an enterprise agreement, you can continue to buy the other stuff, your Windows servers, SQL servers, Project Visio, all the things that are not related to Office 365. You can continue to buy those under the enterprise agreement at the best, at Microsoft's highest discount levels. All right. And if you don't have an enterprise agreement, it's okay because you can actually sign an Office 365 EA, so you can sign a new enterprise agreement using the Office 365 SKUs in place of on-premise, and that gives you the most flexible and cost-effective, licensing vehicle to acquire Office 365. So if you're a big organization, I would look to the enterprise agreement as the vehicle for acquiring Office 365 after you've gone through your analysis, and if you determine that it's the right solution for you. The next step to doing this is really, once you sort of have your layout and where you think it's going to be, is to, let us come in and put some hard numbers to this and say, okay, this is exactly what it's going to cost, and then we can have that TCO discussion to see, okay, here's the licensing cost, but what is this really going to cost you? All right, so do we have any?
We have questions, but I think we should hold them.
Okay.
We have 10 more minutes.
Oh,
I want to make sure we cover SAM.
Yep, all right, Casey, you are up on the SAM program.
I have a log of all the questions, and we will make sure that we get back to everyone who asks questions. Thank you.
All right. So now I'm turning over to Casey Lindsay to talk about the Microsoft SAM program. Great. Thanks, Lane.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Casey Lindsay. I am the Software Asset Management Analyst here at SoftMart. I'm a part of the analytics team, and I'm going to keep my part pretty simple and high level so we can get to the questions that we have in the log at the end of the call. What we want to do is just talk a little bit about our SAM program. SoftMart developed a SAM program really over the course of the last 12 months in preparation for the Microsoft SAM Services program. So we have the capability, we are a gold certified SAM partner of Microsoft, and we have the capability to deliver the services that I'm about to talk about to all of our customers. And we have been doing so over the course of the last 12 months. Before we talk about these specific services, I think it's important really to talk at a high level about what is SAM, because I think there's a misconception out there that SAM, or Software Asset management is just a tool that you put in place that's going to deliver all the information back to you, and you're going to be good to go. Really, SAM is defined more so as the processes and the procedures that surround the management of your IT assets, specifically managing those assets all the way through the life cycle, the stages of their life cycle. I've kind of highlighted a few benefits of SAM. There's many benefits of SAM, but specific to what we've done over the course of the last year with our clients, obviously the number one benefit is going to be realizing cost savings. You'll have the ability to negotiate your existing licensing agreements across the board, knowing exactly what you own versus what you have deployed. Mitigating risk, really understanding the risks that are associated with being non-compliant, and having visibility into those areas where you are compliant and are not compliant, and taking action against that. Governance kind of goes right straight from the risk mitigation, but being able to govern those assets and maintain compliance all the way through the life cycle of your license agreements. And lastly, we list here disaster protection, which really gives you the ability to reduce downtime in the case of an emergency, knowing what you have, where it is, who has it at any given time with a centralized management console or solution that will help you to reduce downtime. So Microsoft has 3 different SAM services that they offer that we can help our customers with. We're going to talk about 2 of them today, the first of which is the Microsoft SAM Services Assessment. And what this really is, in the simplest terms, is understanding Microsoft has built the SAM optimization model. I think it's important to note that this SAM optimization model it's not the gospel, but Microsoft has gone out and basically pulled together industry experts to help them build this model. And you'll see the model down below. It really has 4 parts. It's the basic, standardized, rationalized, and dynamic. And the goal here with our help is we can help our clients understand their current maturity level. So I would say that better than 50% of companies that we've dealt with fall into the basic SAM maturity level. But as you start to take on additional mature processes, you start to graduate from one level to the next. So in the simplest terms, as far as this program is concerned, what we will do with our customers is interview our customers and ask about, it's 10 questions to understand your current maturity level. And then we take all of that information and compile an analysis and present back to you areas where we think we can help you to lower costs, reduce risk, maximize ROI, and obviously help to move you to the next maturity level. So that is the SAM assessment. It's a simple questionnaire identifying your current position and our ability to consult with you to help achieve more mature levels as you move forward. The baseline is the next services program within the SAM services program. So really what the baseline is, it's all numbers. And really what we do here is a gap analysis. And in the simplest terms, we help you to understand, we take your MLS report and help you to understand your current license position as far as what you're entitled to use. The next real important piece of information that we'll gather is deployed software. So if you have your own technology deployed, for example, at SCCM, we will take that data, we will normalize that data to show every piece of software that you have deployed in the environment, and then perform a gap analysis. And I've actually included a screenshot of one of our gap analysis for one of our clients below. But the end result of this engagement is your ability to understand exactly where you stand across the board for every single Microsoft asset that you have deployed in the environment. We will also incorporate OEM purchases, full package product purchases as well, because these specific purchases do not come, they don't show up on the MLS report. So we'll go through this over the course of the process of the engagement. The end result is we will populate an effective license position document for Microsoft, and typically we find ourselves doing these types of engagements in line with true-ups to help customers really understand and eliminate the guesswork for those specific true-ups. So this is a process that we will help our customers with on an annual basis to help them manage their agreements over the lifespan of those select or enterprise agreements. One important piece I think I must highlight is that for each of these programs or these service offerings, the data that we compile must be delivered to Microsoft at the end of the engagement. So I think it's important to make sure that everyone on the call understands that when we go through this process, Microsoft sees you taking part in this process, and then we deliver the results from the assessment, the baseline, back to Microsoft so they can understand your current license position as well as your SAM maturity levels. And they see that SoftMart, as the gold certified partner of Microsoft, has done the work to help you achieve these goals. Real quick, the last SAM service offering is the deployment, and we are going to highlight this on a future webinar, but I just want to talk real briefly on this. For any organization out there that does not have a SAM tool deployed, we have the ability with the deployment to come in there with any of the Microsoft SAM tools, for instance, SCCM, the MAPS tool, M.AIS, and give you the ability to evaluate those technologies at no cost to you. And as far as costs are concerned, every single one of these engagements and service programs is funded by Microsoft. So there's no expense to our clients. It's covered by Microsoft, and they pay software for our ability to do these engagements for you. So those are the three services engagements. I think what we'll do now is open the floor for questions.
Thank you. The question and answer session will be conducted electronically today. If you'd like to ask a question, you may do so by pressing the star key followed by the digit 1 on your touch-tone telephone. If you're using a speakerphone, please make sure your mute button is turned off to allow your signal to reach our equipment. Once again, that is star 1 for questions, and we'll pause for just a moment to assemble the queue. And once again, that is star 1 for questions. And at this time, there are no questions in the queue.
Excellent. All right, so we'll get for those of you to whom we promised answers, everything from SAT 70 to HIPAA compliance, we will make sure that we put those into a document, a record, and send that out to the group so everybody can partake of the answers. If you think of any follow-up questions, feel free to email us directly at analytics@softmart.com. That's ANALYTICS@softmart.com. We'll be happy to answer any follow-up questions or follow-up questions. Whatever's on your mind, let us know, and we'll be happy to help. Thanks again for joining us today. And if there are no other questions, then we'll conclude.
And this concludes today's conference.